Pittsburgh Pirates have a lot of hope and a lot of money tied to KeBryan Hayes, but what can he offer the Pittsburgh Pirates in 2025?
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates. My name is Ethan Smith, your host of the Locked On Pirates podcast since 2020, bringing you all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates, from a lifelong fan to lifelong fans just like you. Today's episode, folks, is brought to you by the wonderful people over at FanDuel. If you want to bet on the NFL playoffs, you want to bet on the NBA, college basketball, hockey, MLB futures, you can do all that over at FanDuel. Welcome, everybody, to Tuesday night's edition of Locked On Pirates here on January 14th, 2025, where we are a month, actually less than a month away from pitchers and catchers reporting to Bradenton, Florida for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And boy, oh boy, February 12th cannot come soon enough. Between now and then, we're going to still be talking about all the stuff happening in the offseason, talking about players that are already here and guys that we know are going to be here for the 2025 campaign, like the guy that we're going to talk about today, KeBryan Hayes. And we're just going to be going and having fun with that. And we are going to be all over it going into 2025, my fifth season covering this team. So I am more than excited to be ready for this. Obviously, it's actually kind of funny right now. I changed the setup a little bit, as you guys can tell. And it's kind of funny because I have my window open in my room and I'm just staring at snow. Can't wait until that's gone and we see baseballs flying all around the diamond instead of snow falling through the sky. So KeBryan Hayes, I wanted to talk about him today because he's been on my mind quite a bit this offseason, because I've discussed all of these questions that the Pittsburgh Pirates are going to have to answer in this offseason and even going into the season, going from what do they do with the outfield? How are they going to create that group? And what is that group going to look like going into this season? How good of a group can it be? First base was a big question mark, and I still think is a question mark because Spencer Horwitz, showed a good bit with the Toronto Blue Jays in 2024, but is he the answer for first base long-term, or are we going to see a guy like Bryan Reynolds move over to that position? You also wonder how the bullpen is going to shake out after a terrible 2024 campaign. And on top of it, the strength of this team is starting pitching, but can it remain the best strength that this team has, or will another strength emerge for this Pittsburgh Pirates team? These are all questions that the Pirates are going to have to answer. These are all questions that we all know they're going to have to answer. And one of those other questions that I've actually failed to talk about this offseason at length is KeBryan Hayes. Now, KeBryan Hayes has been with the team now since 2020, since I started this show. One of my most fond moments ever doing this show was recording on opening day when KeBryan Hayes hit a home run against the Chicago Cubs at Wrigley Field. Sadly, the next day he broke his wrist, so he was out for like 4 or 5 months in what was a dreadful 2021 season. And that kind of kick-started a trend in KeBryan Hayes' career, where injuries have just kind of riddled this guy's career so far. And you look at the extent of where these injuries have come from. You obviously have the wrist, but now the big concern that sidelined him for a good portion of 2024, especially at the end where we never saw him play again after he went to the IL one last time, is his back. And we've heard a lot about this issue with KeBryan Hayes and his back. We've heard a lot about how it's going to affect him moving forward. We've heard a lot of just the medical side of things and why this could be very, very worrisome for this Pirates team. And it really makes you wonder what kind of player that KeBryan Hayes moving forward is going to be, because you look at the sample of what he's been in the 5 years that he's been with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and for what it's worth, he's been a pretty decent player for this team. He obviously won a Gold Glove in 2023, very warranted winning that Gold Glove, mind you. And 2023, I would also argue, was probably the best we ever saw KeBryan Hayes offensively outside of that 2020 COVID year where he went absolutely ballistic. I mean, in 2023, he slashed 271, 309, 453 with a 762 OPS and a 103 OPS plus. And that was after he returned from an injury and was showing us that, yeah, he can be an offensive threat. And if he could ever become an offensive threat consistently, along with the Gold Glove caliber defense that he gives at third base, then you're looking at KeBryan Hayes being one of the best two-way players in all of baseball. But the biggest issue is the consistency of just being able to be available. And that's where you get into the positives and negatives of what KeBryan Hayes will be able to offer this team in 2025. And I think you have to just start with the most glaring negative, which is, can his back hold up for the entirety of an MLB season for him to be and hopefully improve into that offensive threat that we all want to see him become? And it's hard to answer that question right now because it was obviously something that bugged him last year. It was obviously something that will probably continue to bug him moving forward. But the biggest thing that I'm worried about outside of that too is even when he was healthy in 2024, healthy, quote unquote, because I don't think he was ever 100% healthy. And truthfully, I don't know if he ever will be. But he slashed 233, 283, and 290 with a 573 OPS. The OPS was the lowest mark of his career, and many of those numbers were the lowest marks of his career, including a 61 OPS plus. So you walked into 2024 thinking that KeBryan Hayes was going to turn into this just magical offensive player. That's what we all expected. We thought that, he could hit in the 270s like he did in 2023, and a season on top of that where he also gave you 15 home runs, which is overwhelmingly his career high. The highest he's ever had in any other season as far as home runs are concerned is 7 in 2022. So we were going into this prior season last year saying, okay, if KeBryan Hayes can be a 260 to 270 hitter and give you 15 home runs on top of the Gold Glove defense every year, he's one of the best contracts in Major League Baseball on that around $8 million annual value that he signed on his extension. And when he got extended, I don't think anybody really had an issue with KeBryan Hayes being extended. I think it was universally accepted because they knew that the defense was going to be there. He was a minor league Gold Glove award winner. And you knew that when he was coming up, that the defense was always going to be there, which is, of course, a part of the positives of what he can bring you in 2025. But the questions still remain with the bat. And when you also go look at his StatCast metrics last year and versus that 2023 season, you just saw the exit velocity wasn't there. It was only 88.9, which was just not good enough. You saw that the launch angle was very low. It was 29.9. He wasn't getting the ball in the air as much as he was the prior season. Now, we already know this as well, too, that KeBryan Hayes, he's not going to whiff very often. He's a pretty good guy at not striking out either. Doesn't elicit a lot of walks, but if he's going to have a 52 percentile chase rate at 28%, and his XWOBA, his expected batting average, expected slugging, and his barrel rate and his sweet spot rate are all going to be low, then, folks, that's very worrisome. And if you're just going to hope that he's just a good defensive player, that's also okay. But I do think that at some point the team does have to start valuing offense at that position. And you wonder and look around at who that could be right now, and it's kind of tough to find. I mean, I think one of the obvious answers is Jared Triolo, but much like KeBryan Hayes, there's a lot left to be desired with Jared Triolo as far as the offense is concerned. We know defensively that Jared Jones is going to be a phenomenal player, or Jared Triolo, sorry. We know he's going to be a phenomenal player with the glove. He won a Gold Glove as the utility man this year, but the offense leaves a lot to be desired. Isaiah Connor-Falefa can also play that position. He's an average defender at that position. Offensively, he had one of the best offensive seasons of his career in 2024, but do you really think that he can replicate that going into 2025? These are all these questions that you can formulate around the availability of KeBryan Hayes and what he'll be able to bring, what kind of player he can be, what kind of offense he'll bring, because you know when he's on the field that defensively he is going to be a phenomenal player. You absolutely know that. That is a given. But it is worrisome that you don't know the offensive upside on top of if he's going to be healthy or not throughout the campaign, which is where, if you're the Pirates, I think they do need to take the necessary precautions and have some sort of backup plan for that third base position. In all likelihood, that's already in-house with the guys I mentioned, Jared Triolo and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, and maybe you could throw a Liover Peguero in the mix there if you wanted to, but even those guys also don't really have many answers to that offensive problem. And at the corners, that's been the issue. They have gotten no offense out of the corner infield spots in a very long time, outside of those couple of months that we saw from KeBryan Hayes last in 2023 and Jared Triolo when he was getting kind of lucky in that season as well with his advanced numbers not looking so great. So with KeBryan Hayes, he's going to be on this team. If he's healthy, he's going to be the starting third baseman, but it's not going to come without questions. He is going to have questions offensively. He's going to have health concerns. He's going to have health questions. There are going to be days and games and spans of time where he might have to sit out due to the back injury and how his back is right now. And that's just something that the Pirates might have to accept. But when he's on the field, he has to be that Gold Glove defender and start to show some signs of offensive improvement, because we've seen it before in small spurts. We saw it in 2020. We saw it a little bit in 2022, and we saw it at the end of 2023. We didn't really see it in 2024, but it's kind of almost that put up or shut up time now. Is KeBryan Hayes going to just be a purely defensive third baseman that can maybe hit 240, 250, or can he get into that 260, 270 range while remaining mostly available? I'm not expecting him to play 150 games, but if he can play in the realm of 110 to 120 games, I think you walk out of that pretty happy, especially if he's improving offensively as well. So that's what I think he offers. He's going to offer Gold Glove defense, but you have to remind yourself that there are going to be questions about his offense going into 2025. And if he can answer those, the team in turn will probably end up being better because of that as well. Before we start talking about spring training invitees and some names to watch as spring training is approaching probably faster than you think, we'll be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make sure you go to FanDuel.com right now, everybody, because from the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Folks, that's $300 to keep the action going on FanDuel. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. I know because I hit a parlay over the weekend on college basketball, betting on Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, all these other teams that all ended up winning, and I was able to cash my money out right away. So you don't have to wait around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and an official sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network. And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. My name, again, is Ethan Smith. Find me on socials right there at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to all the news that you see about the Pittsburgh Pirates every single day. And spring training, folks, is on our minds. It's right around the corner. February 12th is going to be the day that the Pittsburgh Pirates pitchers and catchers report to spring training in Bradenton, Florida. Schedule obviously already announced. So hopefully if you're heading down there, I get to see a lot of fun pictures and hear about a bunch of fun things. I wanted to try to go, but we'll kind of see how that all goes. As you guys can see now, I'm like all sporty with my water bottle. But the non-roster invitees obviously are always intriguing to look at when you see spring training right around the corner, because there's obviously going to be a ton of batches of these guys. You're going to see a bunch of guys that probably aren't going to be on the big league roster, but there are definitely players that you're intrigued by that can maybe make some noise. Now, this group of players that were announced today, 13 of them, none of them are going to be overwhelmingly exciting. None of them, I think, will make a vast impact on the big league roster, but don't be shocked if you see some of them on the big league roster for a plethora of different reasons. You look at the non-rostered players, obviously Alex over at MLB.com wrote all about this. Carson Fulmer, there was 8 pitchers. You have right-handed pitchers, Carson Fulmer, Isaac Mattson, Tanner Rainey, Johan Ramirez, Yuri Rodriguez, Bert Smith, Hunter Stratton, and Eddie Yean, all right-handed pitchers. You then have infielders Derek Hall, who they picked up from the Philadelphia Phillies, and Malcolm Nunez, as well as Nick Solak, who they signed on a minor league deal. Outfielder Bryce Johnson and catcher Abraham Gutierrez rounds out the list. So you heard some names, folks, that you've probably heard mentioned on this show before, and some names that you obviously will be familiar with. Carson Fulmer, he's had multiple stops with the Pittsburgh Pirates. He was claimed off the waivers a couple times in 2020 and 2021. Never appeared in a game, though. Is there a chance that you could see Carson Fulmer appear in the bullpen at some point in the year? Of course. Bullpen injuries happen. You always need bullpen depth. It's something that every team needs. That's the same goes for Isaac Mattson, who also got a little bit of a look last year. Isaac Mattson really didn't do much, but he was there. But Hunter Stratton obviously comes off as a big name here, because Hunter Stratton appeared in 36 appearances last year for the Pittsburgh Pirates, posted a 3.58 ERA, was actually not too bad in his stints. And I would expect that you would see him back in some capacity in that bullpen, mind you, with injuries or even just performance. If he's in AAA and he's performing well and somebody in this bullpen isn't, I could quickly see him come up at any point. And the Pirates, I guess, think the same. They non-tendered him from the 40-man roster in the offseason, which was no shock to anybody, brought him back on a minor league deal. So he is one of those guys that I think you could see kind of bounce back and forth between the minor league system, particularly AAA, and the MLB team. And for what it's worth, a 3.58 ERA over 36 appearances is not the worst stat line that you could have. And Hunter Stratton showed me a little bit of things last year, as a lot of different guys did, like Carmen Majinski, Kyle Nicholas. You look at those names and you say, okay, that could be the makings of a decent bullpen, especially if he, being Hunter Stratton, could add some valuable depth to it as well. Isaac Mattson obviously was promoted to the Pirates in September, removed from the roster, returning on a non-guaranteed deal. Johan Ramirez, same deal, was here in 2022 and 2023. That's probably why that name sounds familiar to all of you. Again, same deal as Fulmer, Mattson, and Stratton, just going to be a guy that could be bullpen depth. You look at some guys, though, here that are interesting that have been in the minor league system for a while. Eddie Yean is one that I was very high on whenever the Pirates traded Josh Bell to the Washington Nationals, because he was supposed to be the prize of the trade. And last year he had a 4.2 ERA, 69 strikeouts over 75 innings at 2 levels, mostly Double-A Altoona. Received an invite to the Arizona Fall League, allowed 7 runs over 9 1/3 innings. It's just been disappointing from Eddie Yean, and I don't know how much longer he's going to really be a part of this. Obviously, him getting an invite to spring training doesn't mean really all that much. Yeah, you might see him pitch a couple of innings here and there in spring, or pitch a good bit, because he will be valuable minor league depth for this team. Nunez is in the same boat. Whenever the Pirates traded Jose Quintana to the St. Louis Cardinals, they received Johan Oviedo and Malcolm Nunez in return, and I was also high on Malcolm Nunez, a guy who I thought could have slotted into that first base role, brought some power to that position, and he's kind of done that, but in 2024, he was kind of underwhelming with the power. 215, 310, 365 slash with 11 homers and 65 RBIs. He did play first and third. He was with AAA Indianapolis for the better part of the year. Could you see Nunez maybe come up at some point? Maybe. But again, much like Eddie Ian, he's been underwhelming in the regard that a lot of people saw him as the prize of that Jose Quintana trade. And eventually it became Johan Oviedo, who will, of course, be making his comeback from surgery in 2024 that sidelined him for the entire season after a pretty good 2023. Abraham Gutierrez, just kind of a system catcher at this point, appeared in 49 minor league games last year, was mostly with the Altoona Curve. Tanner Rainey was another offseason pickup, of course, 32 years old, 4.76 ERA last year in 50 games, struck out 44 over 51 innings. So again, bullpen depth. You look at Rodriguez, 30 major league games with the Rangers and the Blue Jays the past 3 years. Smith recorded a 4.95 ERA over 50 games with the Marlins and Orioles in 2024. And prior to that, interestingly enough with him, he was in Japan and Korea. So just to throw out some names there of guys that are going to obviously be getting invites to spring training, guys to keep an eye on, maybe as bullpen depth. Maybe you see a Malcolm Nunez really bring that power back and have a very strong 2025 season and maybe make a push for the roster. But again, nobody that's really on that list that you're going to jump off the page for and see as a valuable asset just at this moment. But again, having options for that bullpen is going to be paramount because it is a unit that you want to see improve in 2025. It's a unit that absolutely needs to improve in 2025 for this team to meet its expectations. And outside of that, I think you're going to see more guys come along the track. You're obviously going to see guys that are higher up in the system, like a Termar Johnson. Bubba Chandler, obviously going to get a good look at spring training, although I do believe he is now on the roster, but I'd have to fact check that at a later time. But again, folks, it's going to be right around the corner before you know it. Spring training will be here, and I cannot wait because I think spring training is going to be absolutely fun. And, of course, closer to the time, I'm going to be giving you some of your biggest spring training storylines among the players to watch. But the Pirates are still looking for outfield help, and we've talked about Randall Grichuk last week. We've talked about Alex Verdugo as players that the Pirates are potentially linked to. Now they're throwing another player in the fold that the Pirates are reportedly interested in the form of a veteran. Who is it? We'll talk about it in just a sec. So on this lovely show in the third segment, welcome to all the people that love to stay for the third segment and all my everyday listeners who listen to the show all the time. You're the best podcast fans that a podcast host could ever ask for. It is fun right now to think about all these players that the Pirates are targeting for their outfield help. We've talked about Randall Grichuk, who I am all in on. Alex Verdugo, an intriguing option as well. But Sports Illustrated and Nathaniel Marrero took it upon himself to look at Jesse Winker as a potential option for this Pittsburgh Pirates team. And you look at Laws and Selby, they wrote, Winker had a nice bounce back season in 2024. He set a career high with 145 games played after missing 101 in 2023 with his highest on-base percentage, of course, 360 since 2021. The lefty hitter could be the strong half of a platoon in a contending team's corner outfield, though those spots are quite scarce at this point in the offseason. If we want to go back to Jesse Winker in 2024, he was a Washington National to begin the season, and then, of course, was traded to the New York Mets and actually became a pretty big part of that National League Championship Series run that the New York Mets had last year. And his slash line during the regular season, 253, 360, 405 with 14 homers and 58 RBIs in those 145 games. And just on the surface, I think you take those numbers for what this outfield has struggled with over the course of the last couple of years, especially with the questions that are hammered into your brains at this point that I ask about this corner outfield. Who starts in right field? And if Brian Reynolds moves to first base at times in a platoon with Spencer Horwitz, who plays left field? Are you playing Joshua Palacios, Jack Sawinski, Billy Cook, Nick York? Do you want to play those guys as everydayers? Is that something that you want to do? Jesse Winker, again, not necessarily the sexiest signing in the world, but you look at what he did in the postseason last year. He had 1 home run, 4 RBIs, and posted a slash line of 318, 531, and 636. So he's a guy that would come in here, and he's a winner. I mean, he knows what winning is like, and that's something that I think this locker room and this clubhouse could really use. Now, a lot of you may remember Jesse Winker from his time with the Cincinnati Reds. He's also been a Seattle Mariner. He was a Milwaukee Brewer. And I do really enjoy the prospect of Jesse Winker, obviously from being on the left-hand side. I've said it before, the Pirates absolutely have to get better offensively against right-handed pitching, which is, of course, the majority of what they're going to be facing, and what every team faces is right-handed pitching, because the really only lefty threat that they have that I have full confidence in right now is O'Neal Cruz. And, of course, Bryan Reynolds from the left side is a switch hitter, but just from a pure left-handed point, O'Neal Cruz is really the only guy you look at and say, I have full confidence in. Spencer Horwitz is a question. Jack Sawinski is a question. Palacios is a question. Even a guy like whenever Termarr Johnson comes up, yeah, he might come up and start hot, but I still think he'll have question marks, obviously, as an offensive player as well, even though I absolutely love the bat that Termarr Johnson comes with. Jesse Winker would be a more proven commodity in this regard. He would be a guy that you could stick in the outfield and play a good bit. He is getting up there in age a little bit at this point, but when you're looking for immediate help at a position of need from a guy that's 31 years old, a guy that doesn't chase very often, a guy that walks a ton, a guy that doesn't, or he has a very good whiff percentage. Strikeout percentage, yeah, whatever. The expected batting average and slugging was lower than the 50th percentile, which means that he may have gotten a little bit of luck in there. But defensively, not a great defender at all, -11. Has good arm value, though, good arm strength. So you're not going to really get much of the defense, but you are going to get a guy that's going to find a way to get on base via the free pass. You're going to find a guy that had a 21 batting run value last year between his time with the Mets and the Nationals. Yeah, the fielding is a worrisome thing, -6 fielding run value, but an XWOBA of 329, he's going to bring some pop with him too. I think you got to be okay with this, folks. I think it's a move that you look at and you say, okay, yeah, the last 3 years gets a little worrisome because you're hoping that you're getting 2024 Jesse Winker, who had a 765 OPS, versus not getting 2023 and 2022 Jesse Winker, who had a 567 and a 688 OPS respectively. So, yeah, I mean, at this point, I do think that Grichuk is the one that I like the most, because defensively, he's the best defender of those three, and me talking about Winker, Verdugo, and Grichuk. But I do like, I'm trying to figure out the best way I could say this. I want them to get a left-handed guy. I want them to get a Verdugo or a Winker, or how I've mentioned plenty of times a Jarren Duran or a Wilyer Abreu from the Red Sox. I always pen at and look at them as potential guys, because I just truly believe that this team needs some left-handed pop. They need some left-handed help offensively. Yeah, Spencer Horwitz is giving that to you potentially from what he did with the Toronto Blue Jays last year. Yeah, you have it in O'Neal Cruz. Bryan Reynolds, when he's switch hitting, obviously against right-handers, is going to be on the left side, but I still think you need to get a little bit better at that. And Jesse Winker, if he was going to be his 2024 self, would help with that. So another Pirates another outfielder potentially linked to the Pittsburgh Pirates. They haven't made a move out there just yet to solidify that position or try to solidify that position. So we'll see what they decide to do with spring training under a month away, technically, with pitchers and catchers reporting. And that'll do it for today's show, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Locked On Pirates. Again, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates. Find this show on YouTube and all of your audio platforms. It's free and available to you, so you might as well listen to it. Show your friends, like, subscribe, and comment. And until tomorrow, we'll see you on the flip side.